They just give a big bag of cash to the state legislature. They are rewarding the Somali community with taxpayer money. Are you gonna go work at LL Bean? Are you gonna go get a job and work for $15 an hour at Dunkin' Donuts when your friend is making $1 million a year doing fake healthcare stuff? No. I used Grok to write a program that would guess at the URLs where those documents were. The Secretary of State of Maine, Shawn, who is right now refusing to turn over the voter rolls in the state of Maine to the Trump Justice Department. What I was saying about Medicaid is this is unlike Medicare, which is for older people and is centrally administered in Washington, D.C., and your senator, your representative, they have a big say over stuff happening with Medicare. Medicaid is block granted to the states. So the federal government takes a whole bunch of tax money and they just give a big bag of cash to the state legislature and say, here, you run a program for poor people. That's how Medicaid operates. And each state gets to determine little different programs and how they're going to operate. And they got to kind of color in between the lines that the federal government sets out, but they have huge latitude. So you have all this federal money coming in, a little bit of state money, and what are politicians going to do when you give them a big bag of money? They're going to try to spend that in a way that makes their constituents happy, makes them look good, protects their power. And the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, it gets... people think it's some complicated technocratic policy, but all it did was just make Medicaid bigger, just made the bag of cash bigger. That's basically what Obamacare did. Took Medicaid, this huge dysfunctional bloated welfare program, made enrollment of it much, much bigger so more people could be on this program. And Maine, like Minnesota, is an expansion state. We expanded in 2019, 2020. So more people are eligible. The bag of cash grows. All this money's coming into Maine, and the governor and the legislature, they've got all this money to play with to decide, where it's going to go. And then you add COVID into that, and they're spending this money in a way that is going to protect their political power and accomplish their ideological mission. And the dependency of the Somali community is just a byproduct of that. It's, they are rewarding the Somali community with taxpayer money and turning a blind eye to the fraud in order to protect their own political power. And the byproduct, the consequence of that has been a Somali diaspora that is dependent, that is kind of orbits these fraud programs, these schemes. It's like if you're a young Somali guy and you see all your peers are starting home healthcare agencies or daycares, getting rich, buying mansions, and opening driving Mercedes-Benz G-Wagons, are you going to go work at LL Bean? Are you gonna go get a job and work for $15 an hour at Dunkin' Donuts when your friend is making $1 million a year doing fake healthcare stuff? No. So that the incentives are all misaligned because you've turned a blind eye to fraud. You've designed a system where fraud is far more profitable than doing the right thing. That's what we have. And you've done it, I think, intentionally to protect political power. And we found, I guess getting back to some of our boots on the ground investigations, there's a contract process in the state where you're handing out money. Usually if you're going to spend a whole bunch of money, you do a request for proposals and you have to have, competing proposals to see who's going to provide that service. Transparent, gets the lowest price for taxpayers. You can also do no-bid contracts, which is somebody in the government just picks who the best person is to get this money. Mm-hmm. In Maine, for whatever reason, we have these forms that you have to fill out when you do a no-bid contract, and they're public on the state website for 7 days, and then they disappear. That's the transparency we have. That's how the system was designed. For 7 days, if you check the website during that 7-day period, you can see the form. It could be $1 million, could be $10 million, could be $5,000 because some guy in Hancock County needs like a new prop on a boat or something. But you have to check it during that period of time, and you'll find the no-bid contract for money that's being spent. It's the most corrupt and least transparent way to spend money, to reward your friends, to reward your political allies. And we requested through the Freedom of Access Act all of the no-bid contract documents. We wanted all of these documents because just because they're only public for 7 days doesn't mean they're not still a public record subject to that record request. And the Mills administration came back and told us they couldn't do it. It wasn't technically possible. They weren't able to provide us with those documents. So I was looking back over some old stories that we did, and I found links to old no-bid contracts. I was like, hold on a second. These are all still on a government server somewhere. And so I used I used Grok to write a program that would guess at the URLs where those documents were and download the documents if it found them, and ran it for like 15 hours on my home computer and scraped from the government servers 5,000 documents that they told me they couldn't give me, all pointing towards no-bid contract spending.
Holy shit. Did you send it to them?
No, I didn't. If they want it from me, they're going to have to pay me.
You should send it to them.
No, if they want it from me, they're going to have to pay me, because that's what I have to do when I get documents from them. I have to pay them to search for documents, so they could pay me for the documents. But they actually, Representative David Boyer introduced a bill to make that change. So now those all have to be public. It was like a tiny, tiny win for transparency, but only because we embarrassed them. Mm-hmm. In those no-bid contract documents, again, this is a huge trove of scanned documents. You can't text search through them. It's just this mountain of raw material that you have to search through, just like until your eyes bleed, looking to figure out what the hell's going on here. We find no-bid contracts to Gateway, particularly no-bid contracts to Gateway funded by federal COVID money that came in February of 2022. Right before Governor Mills is running for re-election up against former Republican Governor Paul LePage. And if you pull the contracts, which we did, and read them, and the funding agreements and everything, this money went to create what were called CHOWs, Community Health Outreach Workers. I'm willing to bet that this happened in a lot of states, because it wasn't just the Somali groups, it was the Hispanic groups, the New Maine Public Health Initiative, like all of the who's who of the left-wing NGOs got CHOW money to create these community health outreach workers. And you didn't have to have
Is this COVID PPE loans?
Some of these groups did. Gateway got $700,000 in PPP money, yeah. But this is separate from that. This was CARES Act. This is like the various big,
Well, supposedly, I just read that Palantir has developed some program that's going to go through and basically find all the fraud from the PPE loans.
That's what we need. We need asymmetric solutions. And I could talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done to try to process all of these documents. But I think that the CHOWs are important, because one of the things that I hope some other people listening to this will take away is going into their state and trying to figure out if the same patterns were replicated. Because it's a state-by-state program, whether there's Medicaid or state-administered COVID spending, they just take the same playbook and they run it in a little bit of a different way to a different beat in every state. And so journalists who are working in other states, Nick Shirley, anybody who's in Minnesota or California or Ohio, they can say, geez, they found that in Maine. I wonder if that's happening in my state. It is. You just have to find it. These CHOWs were all your only qualification had to be that you could speak the language of the migrant population that you were targeting. The community health outreach workers, the positive spin of it is that they're providing healthcare to marginalized communities during a pandemic. Okay, so you're going and handing out COVID tests or something in Little Mogadishu to these migrant communities that are increasing, by the way, because as this is all happening, we have a second and third wave of mass migration to Maine that is Central African. Not Somalis. We have Congolese, Angolans, and Rwandans coming into Maine, a genuine refugee crisis in Portland. But the community health outreach workers are tasked with signing up migrants for Medicaid, for food stamps, an EBT card. They were allowed to give the migrants walking around money. They were allowed to buy household supplies.
Walking around money.
They were given in the contract. It doesn't say walking around money. It says you're allowed to buy household supplies. I'm sure that there was a lot of policing of how that household supply money was handed out. They're also tasked with keeping a database on all of the people that they've just gone around and bestowed these patronage benefits on. And under federal law, if you sign somebody up for an EBT card or Medicaid, you are required to provide them assistance registering to vote. So any program that requires NGOs to go out and sign people up for welfare benefits is a de facto voter registration program. So we took no bid contract money, funded by the federal government, handed out through this opaque process, gave it to Gateway Community Services and other groups operating in the same, community, and turned it into a taxpayer-funded voter registration and ballot harvesting program. And so who did those people vote for when they know where their household supply money came from?
Mm-hmm.
Who did those people vote for? And I'll give you a clue, because right after they get this no-bid contract money, Gateway Community Services, Abdullahi Ali, creates an organization called the Community Organizing Alliance. It's run by two of his staffers who worked at Gateway, Sophia Khalid, who was a Lewiston City Councilor and a former special assistant at Gateway Community Services, and her brother, Muhammad Khalid. They're working for him, but they work at Community Organizing Alliance now, which is in the same office building. So it's got a new name, but it's in the same office building. It's like the political arm of Gateway Community Services. And it's tied in with the top Democrats from the state of Maine, non-Somali Democrat political activists. And this is an explicitly political organization that is existing in the same building at the same time that these taxpayer-funded chows are going out and sprinkling money over the community and coming back with a list of, potential voters who are living in these households. And Sophia Khalid now is still running the Community Organizing Alliance, and she did a fundraiser. It was like maybe a month after our last episode. She did a fundraiser with the Secretary of State of Maine, Shawn, who is right now refusing to turn over the voter rolls in the state of Maine to the Trump Justice Department. They're investigating how many non-citizens or migrants could potentially be voting in the state of Maine, and Shawn says, no, I'm not turning over those voter records. And Shawn Graham Plattner, I'm sure you've seen about him, the guy who's running for Senate in Maine, and just a who's who of Democrats go into Lewiston and do a rally in support of the Somalis after this fraud stuff starts breaking in Minnesota. And who is running it but Sophia Khalid, who's former Gateway employee, running the Community Organizing Alliance, no-bid contracts from the Mills administration. And yesterday, Nick Shirley released his reporting on, I guess, the second batch on the non-emergency Medicaid transportation money. And we found also registered at the Canal Street address of Gateway Community Services is a company called Careway Express, which is a non-emergency Medicaid transportation provider that is registered in the name of Muhammad Khalid, who's Sophia Khalid's brother. The reason why I bring up this transportation money is because this is massive, massive money. This is a $750 million contract over 10 years that was awarded to a publicly traded company called Medicaid. And then they distribute it to subcontractors. And it's the subject of a lot of controversy in Maine right now because Medicaid went bankrupt after this contract was awarded through an RFP that was
an RFP.
Request for proposal.
Okay.
So the state of Maine says, we need non-emergency medical transportation, which is paid for by Medicaid, by federal dollars. These are car rides for methadone patients. Like you're Shawn, you live in Lewiston, you need a boofing kit, you need a ride to go get the kit. Literally, you can get a ride to the needle exchange clinic through non-emergency medical transportation or the methadone clinic or your doctor's appointment, whatever it is. So there's this huge need for rides, transportation for Medicaid patients. The state does this on a 10-year basis. They've got a big bucket of money for it. And they say, we need transportation for all of these regions. This had been provided by some nonprofits like Panquist Cap, Waldo Cap, some 501c3s that are left-leaning. They run their own vehicle fleets, whatever. 3 years ago, Medicaid bids for it, and they get it, the contract for the whole state. And their model is different. They're just like a call center and a ride processing organization. They subcontract to all these little tiny, like 35 different subcontractors, many of which in their more urban areas are Somali businesses, like run the Somali cab services. And we don't really know, you don't have a lot of transparency about how they operate after the money flows through Medicaid to them. One of them is Muhammad Khalid's Careway Express, operating out of the same office as Gateway Community Services. But this is $750 million over 10 years.
$750 million?
Yes, for rides in Maine. Disproportionately weighted towards the districts with the most people. That's how the funding formula. The funding formula is complicated, but it's a huge amount of money. Penguins sues because they don't like how the RFP turned out and they think it was sketchy. It comes out during the RFP process that the people evaluating, deciding to give this money to Medicaid and therefore their Somali subcontractors, can't really explain why they did that. They're like, yeah, you know what? That wasn't really fair. We copied and pasted some stuff from some other areas. We can't really explain how this all worked out. Terribly unfair. The people who were evaluating the RFP, giving this money away, said, yeah, it was an unfair and flawed process. But it hasn't been resolved yet. And a bipartisan group of lawmakers last week sent a letter to Governor Mills saying, just rebid the contract. You have the authority. You just rebid the contract. And she won't. She won't do this. For more than a year now, they've been saying, just rebid the contract. You can do it. The company, Medicaid, has gone bankrupt now. They're not providing the rides. There's been this breakdown in service. Maine's poorest, most vulnerable people who actually should be on Medicaid and get these rides, or who want legitimate healthcare services, not made-up daycare services or made-up home care services. They're not getting transportation. They're getting stranded. The system is failing them. So just rebid the contract. And it solves all the problems. The contract can go back to the Maine-based company that has been handling it forever. And it's this mystery. Why won't she rebid this contract? Because it's hurting poor people. Democrats say they want to help poor people. It's formerly a Democrat NGO had that contract anyway. It's just like a big nonprofit, and like a legitimate nonprofit that plays by the rules. It might be left-wing, but plays by the rules. Why won't she just rebid that contract? As of today, she has not responded to Democrats and Republicans. An overwhelming majority of Democrats and Republican lawmakers coming out and saying, just rebid the contract. She won't do it.
And this is over a year ago.
This has been, I think, 3 years now.
3 years
since
this company's
Medicaid
been bankrupt.
So Medicaid gets the contract. They're not a super financially healthy company. Mm-hmm. They go bankrupt. They've gone into penny stock status. They now say that they've come out of the other side of bankruptcy, bigger, stronger, leaner. They're lobbying lawmakers very hard to keep that contract. Obviously, why wouldn't they? Any company would. But their model is not to hire the same people, the same cars, or to operate fleets. Their model is to give the money to subcontractors like Caraway Express. Mm-hmm. They just happen to have a disproportionate number of contractors in these urban areas are Somali-run companies who are co-located with the most notorious Medicaid fraud right now in Maine. And you see the same exact thing in Nick's second video. When that guy David is taking him around, he's like, let me show you the second biggest fraud, non-emergency medical transportation. And I'm like, ding, 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 we have a winner.
Wow.
It's like home care services, non-emergency medical transportation, SNAP, and EBT fraud, where you take the EBT card and you swipe it and you get cash back at a discount for the amount of benefits that are taken off your card. There's all these different programs that are being scammed. But the thing is, so why won't Janet Mills just rebid the contract?
Why do you think she won't? No matter where you're watching the Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this at all, anything, please like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, head to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a review.